Hello and welcome to GovSchool. Get started here in just a minute. Good afternoon. I'm going to start welcoming everybody to GovSchool, and we'll get started here just about 1:31. We'd like to give everybody a few minutes to get into our Zoom room. If you are in Zoom today, please maintain your mute status until you have something you'd like to ask. This is a publicly recorded session. It's going to be available live on YouTube as well. So please maintain your privacy. Good afternoon. My name is Mark, and I'm one of the founders of GovDirections, and I want to welcome you here this afternoon to GovSchool, where we're going to talk about the request for proposal. Just some ground rules. First, this is a live session on YouTube, so please maintain your privacy as you enter our room. If you do have questions, you can raise your hand, technically speaking, and we'll call on you. But otherwise, please hold your mute status to keep from having background noise, okay? Because this is going to be we'll have a fun session. You do have the opportunity to ask questions directly. I do have a chat box open as well. You can type some information in there if you'd like. Maintain your privacy. We will not ask you questions directly. But we'll call on you if we would like to include you in the conversation. What we're going to do today is talk about the request for proposal. GovSchool is a service of GovDirections. We think that if we teach you a little more and help you learn to win, that you're going to have more success. And that's our primary goal. And so here we have in front of you should be our PowerPoint. And today's session is going to be called the RFP. This is a session we started a couple of years back. It's very popular, where we actually take a live RFP and we walk through it. I'm going to point out some the critical parts of the RFP, what you need to be looking for whenever you're developing your response back to them. And we're going to allow you to also help with questions that you might have in the chat box, or tell me, also what types of RFPs you might be looking for when we may go live on the web and start pulling some, and maybe pull those out to help you out today. This session specifically, we're going to identify the structure of a request for proposal. We're going to walk through each section and explain its importance. We're going to use an actual RFP as an example to identify each section. Just a little bit of a background. I have served in the government contracting space for about 30 years, doing classification, organizational consulting, doing productivity improvement type contracts for local governments. I've won contracts in 34 different states, and I've served about 400 different projects in some capacity, either as a prime or a sub, with local governments, primarily cities and counties. Also have won some bids at the state level. Founded GovDirections really as a way to help pull some of that information together, frankly, back in 2006, after setting out from the founding of governmentbids.com. We founded that in 1998, sold that to a public company in 2003. But fell with a love of helping other companies learn how to do this and learn how to work with governments and how to win contracts. And so that's been my passion, and that's what I hope to be able to do today with you. I welcome you to check me out on LinkedIn, and you can come and ask questions later on if you like directly, or give us a call. And our phone numbers on the beginning of this are at our website, 800-492-8523. Always like to hear success stories from our members. If you're not currently a member of GovDirections, you can join 103,000 companies who use us in some capacity. You give us a call, and one of us will be glad to help you with that membership. As you know, I like to start off with quotes. The quote I'm going to use today when we're talking about request for proposal is, "It's supposed to be hard. If it were easy, everyone would do it." So that's a Tom Hanks quote in a league of, I think it's called A League of Their Own, and it's about a softball team. And of course, we're watching the NCAA softballs happening currently, the championships series, and so encourage you to do that. But just like in softball, you have to have practice. You get better, and that's what this is to encourage. So once while it is a little difficult, you come as an expert in your field. So you should have a leg up whenever you go out to bid on an individual contract. And I'm going to show you how to make sure that happens. There are particular, we use the terminology request for proposal, but there are other contracting instruments that are popular among local governments. And I want to make sure you're familiar with some of that terminology. There's a request for information. This is an RFI, sometimes referred to also as sort of a source of sought, or request for qualifications, an RFQ, where they're actually a government's looking to find companies who potentially could bid on a project. May not actually have the actual bid in place, but what they're anticipating doing in order to really go out and sort of do a market survey. These are popular with some innovative type services or supplies, or whenever there's a disruption in the supply chain, like we saw this more recently with COVID. And now we're seeing some disruption and maybe in materials and supplies as well. So the organizations will issue these types of calls, or like for request for qualification, for example, they'll issue that for companies when they're actually looking to hire somebody with a specialized skill set, like an attorney, for example, or an engineer, or other types of professional services. And then we see the invitation to quote, or request for quotes. That's whenever there's a specific item that they're looking to procure. Sometimes it's very informal. They want you to give them a call. Other times it's a fax back or a very quick turnaround. The types of services or supplies they're looking to acquire with this type of instrument should be pretty standard. For example, like pest control services, you should know what they're expecting to receive. The quality should be very similar, and all they really need to get is a quote, 3 or 4 quotes, and they'll go out for that. So very informal. Then we have the invitation to bid or request for bids. Here, a government, once again, pretty much they know what they need. They have a very solid specification for their product, and what they're looking at primarily there is price, or quality plus price. And they'll tell you that in the actual call, but it's a very structured document where you're going to complete a form and you're going to submit it back, or sometimes in a closed or a closed off system, or even on some sort of web system, but where the information is confidential. And then they're going to open that up at a particular time, and then whoever has a low bid or the one that meets their specifications is going to win. And then we have the request for proposal. The request for proposal, or RFP, is somewhat less formalized in the sense that it's not really detailed specifications. Here, a government really knows what they're trying to achieve, the objectives they're trying to achieve, the goal of the project, or the service or the supply that they're trying to acquire, but they're not quite certain, or they're just a little bit maybe unsure how to go about asking for the right thing, because after all, you're the expert in providing that. They may want your methodology for responding, how you would accomplish the goal that they're seeking, but they're looking for you to propose back to them. And here they're going to give you, really the clarity of purpose of what the project is, and then you're going to say, yes, I can accomplish this objective. And then they're going to ask, in that type of document, for you to tell them about yourself. They want to know your qualifications, your experience, and how you want to go about doing it. And you're going to really sell yourself in that RFP, but still structured. But it can happen where you move into more of a negotiated type stage before they actually hire you. So these are some different types of contracting instruments that local governments, state governments, federal agencies will use. And I'm going to walk through specifically the request for proposals. Sometimes at the federal level, there'll be maybe even a special notice of some sort, but asking you to respond back to them. You see it at all different levels, including in an agile way, meaning that you sometimes are at the table even writing the documents. So what is a request for proposal? It is a formal solicitation. It's often done through a bidding process by an agency or company interested in procurement of a commodity, service, a valuable asset. Two potential suppliers are going to ask you to respond back to them. They want you to give them a business proposal. Okay, and so this is the formal definition of RFP. What you see in a typical RFP or specific structure, where first they lay out their statement of work. They will talk about technical specifications, schedule, with the time frame that you have to respond back to them and how to accomplish the objectives that they're seeking, a list of specific deliverables, typically step by step, contract terms. And I would point out the list of deliverables sometimes are open-ended, where you'll respond back to them and help them understand what you'll be delivering and how you'll be delivering it. The contract terms and conditions are almost always laid out. Here's how we're going to work together, and the government will structure that. It's very rare for a government to step away from having to using something that's not something that is different than what they normally would use. Those are pretty strict with local, state, and federal government. These are typically developed by a city attorney or county attorney or an authority attorney, so they're really reluctant to change. But in case you get an RFP that doesn't have a contract terms, then you would submit one of yours back to them. Go ahead and take that initiative, and that way, potentially you can have a contract more favorable to you. You also will see the format of proposal. Here they're going to tell you how they want you to respond so that they can at least keep, sort of apple-to-apple comparison with the types of information that they're seeking. They will always ask you for your qualification experience. So have that ready to go. And we're going to talk about, the key parts of that and making sure you can represent yourself in a very in a good way. Specifically, those of you who are new, it's somewhat difficult sometimes to bring performance past history to the table when you've just started your firm. But always remember that everyone started somewhere. You're coming to your sector with a knowledge level and a skill set that prompted you to start your company. So you should be able to sell yourself regardless if you have current experience or not. And then you want to talk about cost breakdown and how they normally would be asking you to respond back. Sometimes they'll ask you to actually put cost specifically for RFP in a separate sealed envelope of some sort, because they really first want to make sure that you're able to fulfill their goals, you're able to meet their objectives, and you have the qualification experience that's required in order to do that. And then if pulling those who meet all their expectations together, maybe as a subset of those who responded, going down to maybe 2 or 3, and then they'll look at cost and have that as a part of the final evaluation criteria. And we're going to look at that evaluation criteria of an example of one that I actually have completed in the past, and how that decision-making process works. And it's important that all of this information that you're aware that this is done in the public in a public space. So there are individuals actively involved in it where the information is captured, and And so you can see and you can get examples and you can learn from what's out there, because this is almost always publicly available somewhere, and see exactly how evaluation criteria and so forth is used by organizations. So it's important you do your research in the process when you really find that opportunity that you're looking for, and you'll find you'll have more success. And speaking of, when you're looking and you're searching, it's always helpful to make sure it's the one that you want to find. Okay, this is another quote by Coldplay. You don't want to spend a lot of time throwing darts, and trying to get lucky. Here, you need to be methodical in your approach, pinpoint your opportunity, understand where you're successful at traditionally, and try to learn from that, and make sure that you're using your time in an efficient way. For example, when I look for contracts that I might want to respond to, over time I have slowed down a little bit. I think you get to that point where you've done what you can achieve in particular areas, but I still like to do projects, so I'm very selective in my approach. I only work in certain areas. For example, I like the West, specifically in the Dakotas. And then I traditionally like to look for projects that are in a population size for an organization, maybe between 10,000 population up to about 25 to 35, not too big, not too small. And I'd like to see solid budgets with the good. I also want to make sure the council or the commission that I'm working with is there and helpful, so that as opposed to, sometimes you see those where they're battling constantly, not necessarily a fun environment to go into. You can learn that just by reading the minutes of meetings and then following the agendas. And a lot of times nowadays, everything's video, so you can go back in there and make sure. But looking at particular common themes or even denominators that you can readily measure, that in order to determine which ones you want to actually go out there and find and work on. There's one just recently I approached. This is in Carter County, Tennessee. Is a county government close to Atlanta, not too far, about within a driving distance, about 4 or 5 hours. A nice drive up there too, so it's an enjoyable spot in the very nice part of the country. And so it was something that caught my attention. And for a salary survey and compensation analysis, which is the type of work that I do. And so I went and I pulled that one, and I'm going to kind of show you what an actual RFP looks like here. So here's an RFP that they had on the internet, and they announced. And when I pulled it off, I already started making. I marked this one up a little bit, and it was really right in my wheelhouse. It was 256 full-time employees, 42 part-time. I'm looking to work with governments typically with about 200 or 300. Getting above 300 starts to get beyond really my scope and my ability to perform in a solid way. I want to make sure I'm successful in the projects that I respond to. So there's something that I'm looking for whenever I actually pick up an RFP. I also have a background in public finance. So I noticed this one here, that they were looking, the respondents were director of finance, deputy director of finance, people that I can speak their language and understand what they're looking for, and they should, whenever they go back and do research on who I am, they'll see that I have that background, and hopefully I'll have a higher evaluation from them. So I'm kind of starting to match up somehow with this. I know I'm thinking more and more this is going to be something I will have success with. And so I'm paying attention to key things, such as just general information about the county. When's the last time they actually did a project in my field, or something they've done recently, so I can go back and do some historical type of review. And I'm also going to look at start paying attention to due dates and due times. And so when you're looking at an RFP, you want to make sure that you start jotting down particular pieces of information. In fact, I have a Google Drive, and I've got a spreadsheet built, and I'll put in the bid title. I'll put in a synopsis of what they're really looking for, maybe even the title that says enough for me, and then the agency and who the main contacts are, and then the due dates. That's so important. And so I want to make sure I don't miss that due date. I want to make sure I give myself enough time to actually go out and actually take a look at an individual project, because work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. This is Parkinson's law. It is the truth. So if this, I recognize that I've got, 2 weeks to do something, it literally is going to take me 2 weeks to get it back. If they give me 4 weeks, it's going to take me 4 weeks. Okay. So that's just the nature of things, but I want to make sure that the steps that I have to take to pull the information all together, I've got enough time to do that. And I'm not, even when I start giving myself deadlines and preparing that response as a part of that. And so that's important to do that. In fact, as you build your maybe your Google Drive or your drive of information, you want to make sure you include the information that you're going to have repeatedly. For example, I'll show you some of this. They're going to ask me for a background about a summary of my company. You should have your capability statement prepared at this point. If you don't have a capability statement, you need to get that done. That information is going to be it's going to be something you can lift right off there. What your executive summary, what are your differentiators? What are the NAICS codes that you work with, or the NIGP commodity codes, for example, this one, because it's a local government one. And I have those details. I'll show you a couple of capability statements in a minute. I'm also going to pull up, if they've got something unique, here they want 10 copies of a proposal, I'm going to make sure I've got 10. They want to make 10 sealed, all in a sealed envelope, clearly marked, so you're going to pick up on these little minor things. Those are always so important, because if I fail to do that, if I give them 8, then I could be disqualified, okay? Or if I give them 10 or give them 15, then they're going to say, why did you give me too many? You need to do exactly what they ask you to do. A key thing to remember when you're looking at an RFP and you're starting to get ready to respond to it, especially when you're an entrepreneur, it's in your nature to be creative potentially, and to, almost go overboard. In government, you don't do that. When government, we respond to a government agency, you do exactly what they ask you for. That is the first rule. Okay. So you start making notes of the specifics about them, so that you don't mess up and fail to mark the outside of the envelope as they have asked you to. Okay. Because that's going to get you ruled out as ineligible in some capacity. Not always, but you don't want to take that risk. Okay. And so they will give you an introduction about them. Generally, the introduction is fairly short. Whenever a technical writer is preparing a document like this, the good news is that they're mostly trained by the same organizations. I actually teach a graduate school class of public administrator type students who, and I teach them how to write RFPs. And the first thing I do is, say, here's how it's going to be broken down, and we're going to pull this information together in a concise way, and it's going to be somewhat standard, because we want to make sure when companies respond, they're able to easily find the information they need. So they follow the ABCs of technical writing. First, accuracy. Giving you specifics, details, population size, numbers that are important. They're going to make sure they're accurate in the process. Brevity. Only what you need to know in order to respond to the project. Okay, and not a lot of extra words. I'm not a big fan of words, in fact. So you're providing them exact information that they need. And then C, clarity. Be very clear. Okay, leave nothing to doubt. Okay, and that's very important. And so, if for example, as you're reading this, if there's something they needed to, they want you to respond to, you're not able to respond to, you need to be clear back to them and say, I'm not able to do this, or okay. And there, I'm sorry about that. My Siri went off in my ear. Let me turn that off. Here we go. And so I'm stepping through here. They want to give me some specifics. And so I'm going to start learning about that. But then they go step into the scope of services. Okay. Here is the most important part of an RFP. Here's where they tell you what they're going to expect for you to accomplish. Okay. In this particular situation here, there was even an item where I'm not able to do it. So I went ahead and said, I'm going to have to invite this other person in to actually do this part of the project. So I'm starting making notes to understand that. I'm also starting to pick up on key things, like in this particular situation here, I'm working with a financial management committee. Okay, so I don't need to focus so much on the city council, or they're not the decision makers here. The decision makers on this particular project will be this financial management committee. I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna do some research with that government's website, learn who those members are. Okay, learn about them. Okay, they're going to talk about the goals, the objectives, the strategies. They want me to review, they want me to conduct, they want me to perform. Okay, these are items that I normally see. Okay, nothing here really extraordinary. The one specific item that has to do with a benefit structure. I'm not really an expert in this topic. So I want to beef up my response with an expert. Okay, I'm going to reach out and team with someone. So get those people that you potentially could contract with, or those other team members you might want to call on in order to be ready to go. Okay, and then they're going to some broad things, but those 6 items, I'm going to make sure my response back to them really addresses that scope. They also want the deliverables. These are actually the things that I'm going to hand off to them, the things that have to be a part of my project. At this point, I'm going to start picking up on specific language that they're using. And in my response back to them, I'm going to repeat that language back. Okay. I'm going to say, yes, I'm going to propose classification, reclassification plan with pay ranges, or whatever your product is, or your service or your supply. Say, yes, I'm going to do this. Here is how I'm going to do this. Here's how I'm going to achieve this specific deliverable. I'm going to, as I go through, and I'm going to actually go and sit down. I'm going to check off each one of these items, okay, and make sure that I cover them as I go through it, and so I don't leave anything out. They're also going to give me, if there's any requirements. For example, in this particular case here, insurance requirements. They're going to tell me exactly what I have to have. Okay, I'm not going to volunteer more than I need, but I'm going to at least meet them what they're requesting. Okay, and as I go through, and if, for example, if I'm in a situation, I actually have this type of liability covers, but if I had maybe half that, then I might say to them, yes, I can provide that. And not only that, I'm going to reach out to my insurer and ask them to go ahead and give me a letter saying, if they win this contract, then I will be able to insure them. I'm not going to go ahead and go purchase that, because sometimes it's things that we don't really necessarily want to have permanently unless we win a contract at this level. So I would just tell them I'm able to do this. Here's proof of that. Okay. Now, if it's only a few more dollars, I'm definitely going to just go ahead and acquire at the higher level that they need me to do, whatever they need me to respond back to them. The proposal format, as I mentioned earlier, they're going to tell me exactly how they want me to put it together. Okay. The reason why they want to do this, because here they want to, lay your proposal out and compare it to others. So if you fail to do what others have already done, then you're literally off the short list at that point. So you want to make sure you lay it out and you propose it in the exact format that they're looking for. I mean, sometimes I even will put together a folder of support and have sections. So section 1, a brief overview. Section 2, experience and expertise. Section 3, a work plan. Section 4, here's what I expect you to do. 5, list of references. And I was going to stop here because, a lot of times, in fact, the number one question I always hear from our members, new members specifically, is, I don't have any experience. Who am I going to list? And I always just step back and say, what do you mean? Okay, you started as your own company. You're in this business now. There's a reason why you're here. You've got some experience. You've got some references. You may not have won a government contract yet, but reach out to the folks that believe in you, who can give you a good reference. That's what they're looking here for. They're looking for proof that you are successful, that you can be successful, and that you were able to fulfill your responsibilities accordingly. And that's what they're primarily looking for here. Now, when you add multiple contracts, and you will over time, stick with it, you're going to win them. Okay. When you do, then you want to start making sure you have references that have some commonality with that organization's request. I mean, for example, I've worked on some 400 different projects. On this particular one, I'm going to go and I'm going to pull those contracts that have something common, like the same size of the government, same region of the country. Potentially they're the same type of government agency, because birds of a feather flock together. They go together, and so if they're with a county government at this level, then they're going to go to a conference, and they're going to know other people at these conferences at the same level of size government they are, and so that's an important thing to remember. They're going to most likely know somebody. Also, in the warning kind of technical documents, make sure that they're a good, solid. Here you're looking at a scan form. We'll make sure it's top quality information when we're responding back to them. And then they're always going to ask you some items that you sometimes look at. What do you mean here? Or some proof of verification. A lot of it's not that you're not a communist. You see these type of old language old legal rules that are out there that governments have to comply with. And so you can see these kind of documents. Just go ahead and start storing those in a Google Drive, and then you can just pull them out. Maybe your W-9, for example, or verification of any kind of certification they're looking for. You have that ready to go, and you're just dropping those in. I'm always going to give me a selection process. How are they going to go about making the decision? Okay, and who's going to be involved in that? I'm going to do some research on them, and I'm going to make sure that I fully understand the process. Okay, because at the very end, I may not win this. I want to go back and I'm going to review it to see why. Okay, and I want to make sure I've checked off everything, I've done everything, and I also know how they've decided to go through that process of making a decision. And they're telling me evaluation may require additional clarification, so they're letting me know ahead of time that they're probably going to have a meeting where I might have to come to it if I'm going to narrow it down to a small group, and so I should probably expect that. Once I get past that point, the rest of it's probably going to be somewhat consistently the same in almost all RFPs. So I imagine if I'm in Tennessee, I'm going to see the same sort of language law. I have to pay my taxes. I've got to show ownership. I've got to accept what they're going to tell me, and they're also going to say they're going to have to agree that accept what I give them, and it's got to be acceptable. Terms and conditions, what I have to work with, exceptions, employment, non-discrimination language, conflict of interest. This is all going to be the same. Okay, almost always giving me no rights and giving them all the rights. Okay, just understand that when you're working with government, and that's it. So there's a 7-page RFP. They're usually not so long. Should always be, straightforward, easy to understand. Sometimes they can get detailed with attachments. In fact, I've seen one of the 1,000 pages one time. That violated my rule of brevity, by the way. So they usually want to keep it about this level, this size. And so here's your sample RFP there. And so what I want to do is, whenever I took this, there's some specific tips. First, whenever I pull out any RFP, invitation to bid, request for information, I'm going to read it entirely before I do anything. Okay. I'm going to pay attention to some of the items that you and I have just discussed. I'm going to start pulling out the things that really matter. Okay. But I'm still going to read everything. And I'm going to put most of the key things maybe on a spreadsheet or a Google Drive that I'm going to check off later on to make sure that I've done them. And then I'm going to set it aside. Okay, I'm going to think about it. I'm going to actually probably talk to my colleagues, make sure it really is the one that I wanted to find. There's not some hidden issue for me that's going to take up all my time. It's not going to be successful with it. I want to start gauging my level of success before I even respond, because it does take a lot of effort to write an RFP and response back. Now, I'm going to keep those tips, or you want to start saving that information, because specifically whenever you're in a field like I'm in, or most of us have some sort of specific item that we're going to respond back to, it's the same thing over and over again. So I'm just going to be lifting that text once I've gotten it written, and then I'm going to modify it with that proposal that I'm going to complete. Okay, and so what I want to do is I want to show you one that I've done recently, the response I did back to this particular RFP. So I've got this should show you a Word document at this point. And so here, I've got a cover letter. It always goes back with anything. And traditionally, my capability statement is going to be right behind this. And a capability statement is important in the process. You can use that in a lot of different ways, including the pre-marketing. At this point, I'm responding to an RFP. The same information is going to be involved in the request proposal back to them. But that document that I have as that 1-page capability statement, it just shows that, I'm ready to go already. I understand what I'm doing. I know what I'm talking about. I know how to work with government contracts. In addition, whenever I go into the meeting, assuming I'm going to get invited to this presentation, which is I've got a very, very good shot at, and I'm going to be ready to go, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that document, I'm going to have it there to hand out, and they'll be looking at that as opposed to my proposal, and I'm going to be talking with them and explaining the proposal, but they're going to be looking at my capability statement. The last thing you really want them doing is thumbing through a 20, 30-page document and trying to keep up with them. You want them to focus on you and what you're able to accomplish, and they will have looked through that detailed document most likely anyway. So that's just a tip. But you always, just restate what they're looking for. You also want to make sure that you speak to that you understand the project, and then why they should select you. Okay, be very clear. And why they select you, your differentiators should be always included on that capability statement. In the proposal document, lay it out very clearly, title back of the actual project, the due date they're asking for, and how they get in touch with you. Usually my email and my name there as well. Your profile, going back, I'm going to give that. They basically told me how they wanted it laid out in that format of proposal, and then I've broken it down here, okay, in the exact same format. So even though my proposal can be in different content delivery methods over time, my profile sometimes might be at the end. It's always built around what they're asking me, so I can reassemble it in the method that they want me to assemble it. Okay, so they may want the client contacts at the very end, and I need to do that in that process. Okay, but always use their format. And then I'm gonna give a profile, and here I am there. I'm as a part of this. Tell some details. I'm gonna, brevity. I'm gonna speak enough to let them know who I am and where I'm able to accomplish it, but I'm not going to overkill. Okay. My representative contact, always check with them before you send them. Okay. Make sure they know that they're going to be a part of that. And then I'm going to use some common themes. For example, this is a county government somewhat close by, another county government about the same level of employees. Some that there might be some relationship that I can pick out from that. But other reasons why. And in this particular case here, it's in Tennessee. Honestly, even though I'm in Georgia, I don't have a lot of experience in Tennessee. So I went ahead and gave them 5 different ones, even though they only asked for 3. Okay, because I had some more, but I didn't have anybody in Tennessee. So I kind of did supplement that. Here, though, I list my other agencies that they asked for, a sample list, and we got that for them. I put it in there, organized. I gave them a summary of the folks who would be helping me, and the ones that will be a part of my team, making sure that's also part of that capability statement. But this, of course, this point is much more detail because it's going to be the actual proposal. Okay. And then I'm going to restate my responsibilities and who's going to be responsible for them. And so here I am on this one. And so I'm going to be one of the project directors. Here I have, here's my restating the understanding they asked for that. And so laying out how I'm going to deliver in very clear, quick paragraphs for each item they want me to address. And then they wanted that fee structure separately. And so then I put that fee structure there. And then I also, because they didn't, given a contract, I went ahead and submitted a memorandum of agreement. You're ready to hire me, let's go. Okay. And then in that contract, I've laid out the deliverables and the schedule like they've asked us to. Okay. And so, that's a sample, straightforward response back for an RFP. And so I wanted to show you one. Now, the truth of the matter is, on this particular one, I did not win it. And so I always like to point this one out because in this particular case, I did everything I was supposed to do. I was the top rated, in fact. I had 50 points. The next one had 49. But my pricing was a little bit on the upside, and I was not selected. But I was able to go back and look in the minutes of the meetings, understand that. And that's important to understand because the only source of knowledge is experience. This is Einstein's quote. And it's going back and learning why you fell can help you improve your next one. In this particular case, I wasn't willing to do that business at a lower price. Okay, so I'm not going to change anything. Everything else was successful. I had the better approach, but I was not going to go in and buy the business like the competitor did. And so I was willing to walk away from that. And you have to decide that in the process. So whenever you're looking at your performance and determining your pricing, and actually do a session just on past performance research, you can take a number of specific pieces of information on indicators, and you take a look at it, and price is one of those. And you look at your mean, and if you can walk away from something, you might want to be about 20% higher. If you really want the business 20% lower, don't get beyond that. Otherwise, you're wasting your time on both sides of it. Okay, governments don't want you to undersell yourself, and they also don't. It doesn't really do good. They're not going to hire you when you're looking at twice the project size. But you can sit through that, and we have there's actually a video on performance research. But this is what I wanted to share with you today. We wanted to identify the structure of a RFP. We wanted to walk through each section and explain it's important. And then I used an actual RFP as an example to identify each section. And so that was our objective through GovSchool today. And we want to always keep these short and sweet. But if you have any questions at this point in time, those who don't can off here. But if you have a question, I'll be glad to try to answer your question for you. Any questions? Just raise your hand or unmute yourself and I'll call on you. So thank you very much for joining us today. And I look forward to your attendance at others. Go to govschool.com and check out the classes later on this month. Thank you. Have a great day.